We're all aware of the many controversies that touch on the recent conflict in Gaza. I just want to say a couple of words to give you a context, so you understand a little more how Amnesty comes to this issue. For many years, Amnesty focused primarily on prisoners of conscience and issues relating to torture and the death penalty. And when it came to armed conflicts, we generally speaking had little to say. But in the 1990s, as the international community and the human rights community was faced with these terrible conflicts in Yugoslavia, in Rwanda and elsewhere, in the wake of the end of the Cold War, we more and more found ourselves compelled to defend the integrity of the Geneva Conventions, and particularly as they relate to the treatment of civilians and attacks on civilians during armed conflicts. So if you do a Google search or you go to the library, come to our office in Davis Square and look for reports on these various conflicts, you'll see both at Amnesty International and our colleagues at Human Rights Watch and other human rights organizations, a growing emphasis on the need to defend the rights of civilians during these conflicts and to uphold the integrity both of the Geneva Conventions and of international humanitarian law. Now, when it comes to the Middle East, at Amnesty International, this includes all the countries of the Middle East, including for us North Africa. And we've had a great deal to say about all our favorite countries, whether it was Iraq under Saddam Hussein or Iraq after Saddam Hussein, whether it was Iran under the Shah or Iran since the Shah, in Syria under the father or the son. Our job is to make everyone feel uncomfortable through what we hope is both factual reporting and dispassionate campaigning. And I think if you do your research and look up all your favorite countries at our website, amnestyusa.org, or look at our annual report, which typically has 130 or 140 countries listed, which is a snapshot of our campaigning and of our research on any given, on these countries, most member states of the United Nations, you'll see that Amnesty is true to its word. Our job is to be tough on everyone and not to pull punches and not to play favorites. I think we'd all agree that the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, not only between Israel and her Arab neighbors, but between Israel and the Palestinians, is one of the most disheartening conflicts of the post-war period. It's not for me to say whether the way to a settlement is obvious. Many people feel it is, that previous US administrations have put on the table ways to resolve it, but here we are. If it was easy, it would be resolved. The conflict in Gaza touches on many of our concerns. Deliberate attacks on civilians, originating from both sides. The question of what happens to civilians during a conflict. The question of excessive use of force, of disproportionate use of force, of access to the conflict area. And these questions, of course, relate to both sides of the conflict. When the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. And whether it's Hamas or the government of Israel carrying out these attacks, for one reason or another, it is inevitable, as in any conflict, however one side justifies its actions, that civilians who are not responsible for the actions of their governments, regardless of how they voted, or regardless of how it's claimed they voted, are harmed. And it's the job of human rights organizations, as I said, to come to their defense and, we feel, hold people accountable. I'm very pleased that we have two speakers who have been willing to join us today for this discussion. Our first speaker this afternoon will be Jeff Robbins, who's a former U.S. delegate to the UN Human Rights Commission in Geneva, Switzerland. He was previously the president of the World Affairs Council in Boston and has published various op-eds about foreign policy issues, particularly in the Middle East. He served for 3 years as an assistant U.S. attorney in the District of Massachusetts and is currently a litigation member at Mintz, Levin, Cohn, Ferris, Glovsky, and Popillo law firm here in downtown Boston. We're very pleased Jeff could join us today. Jeff.
Thank you very much. Let me get right to it. From 2000 through December of 2008, Hamas and Islamic Jihad fired approximately 8,000 rockets, mortars, and missiles at Israeli civilians, men, women, children, poor working families struggling to earn a living in the communities of southern Israel. These civilians were not in Gaza. They weren't doing anything to Hamas or to Islamic Jihad except to exist. This was not the accidental hitting of one house instead of another by mistake or because of a directional error. This was, to be plain about it, the premeditated, deliberate, intentional, systematic, planned targeting of innocent Israeli civilians for the purpose of killing as many as could be killed, maiming as many as could be killed, and traumatizing and terrifying the rest. These were pure and unadulterated human rights violations of the most egregious nature, constituting crimes against humanity by Hamas, which now, in a genuinely Orwellian twist, which might be amusing were it not so Orwellian, invokes the cause of human rights against Israel. For much of this period, by the way, Hamas and Islamic Jihad were not only rocketing Israeli civilian centers from Gaza, they were also blowing apart Israeli civilians in Haifa, Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem. So from 2000 to 2005, Hamas used suicide bombers, frequently themselves just children, to blow approximately 1,100 Israeli civilians to pieces, to maim approximately 5,000 Israeli civilians, and to leave thousands of Israeli families in needless grief, blowing apart discotheques, restaurants, houses, Passover celebrations, buses, you name it. These too were the deliberate, pre-planned, intentional killing of Israeli civilians, typically with bombs that were packed with nails and pieces of metal so as to rip through as much flesh as possible. Now, these attacks amounted to the collective punishment of the Israeli civilian population by Palestinian groups who have pledged themselves to annihilate Israel. They're not interested, these particular groups, in boundary lines. They have announced to Israelis, we will destroy you. We will destroy all of you. But if the attacks from Gaza represented the collective punishment by Hamas of Israeli civilians, they also happen to represent the collective punishment by Hamas of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, whom Hamas effectively holds hostage. Because in order to effectively target Israeli civilians, Hamas essentially targets Palestinian civilians, whom it forcibly uses as human shields in violation of well-established humanitarian law. And here, quite simply, is how this works. By firing these rockets and mortars and bombs from hospitals, schools, mosques, and homes, and by storing the rockets in hospitals, schools, mosques, and homes, Hamas guarantees, you can go to the bank, absolutely, that when Israelis try to stop the rockets from being fired, innocent Palestinian civilians, men, women, children, old people, poor people, living in or near the hospitals, schools, mosques, and homes, will be killed and wounded, which achieves what this is all about, after all, which is a public relations victory. Never mind about Palestinian civilians who are killed or hurt. Who cares about them? So goes the theory. And in that way, a Hamas leadership which gives every indication of not giving all that very much of a damn about the welfare of the people of Gaza can guarantee the loss of human life on both sides, so that its spokesmen and defenders can say, can you imagine these Israelis? Look at the civilians that they have killed. Which is one of the things which led Abu Mazen, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, to say this about Hamas, quote, "It is a dark organization without any concern for the national aspirations of the Palestinian people, aspirations which are threatened by their actions," unquote, which is relatively understated as these things go. The hope on the part of some folks is that people of good faith in certain audiences can be played, not to put too fine a point on it, for fools, and that no one will point out what is so incredibly obvious, that the killing